of that. So today we're going to discuss digital boundaries, and today is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. This whole month is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. So we're doing a different workshop every week. So if you haven't registered for any of our future workshops, that is something that would be a great thing for you to do. You could check out our website to go and register for those future workshops, and those should be really helpful, and they'll also be recorded and put on YouTube as well if you can't make that particular day or time. So I'm really excited for all of this. And another thing to note is that we are also doing a giveaway today. So if you participated in our challenge this week, please, if you want to participate in our challenge before the end of the workshop, feel free to do that. So one thing is asking about what kind of boundaries do you set digitally with friends and family, and why? Why do you set those boundaries? So if you wanted to put that in the chat, that'll qualify you for our giveaway. So if you want to take the time right now to do that, we only have one person that participated in our challenge, and if no one else participates, then the prize goes to them. So, which will be a Starbucks gift card. So just letting you know that. So without further ado, I'm going to go into our discussion agreement / rules for this whole workshop. So make sure to practice self-focus, attend and share about our own experiences. I love to hear about people's experiences, but just make sure we're speaking for ourselves and not for a whole group, or expressing assumptions about other people's experiences, understanding the difference between intent versus impact. So saying something that is meant to be something that is well-meaning when it actually harms someone else is really important to acknowledge, and understanding the difference and realize that you may say something that can be harmful to others regardless if you mean well. Trying on new ideas, being willing to try on new ideas or new perspectives that you may be unfamiliar with, creating a brave space. Moving up and moving back is really important. So if you're typically the type of person that always wants to participate or contribute, maybe you could step back a little bit and listen to other people's perspectives or engage other folks. Especially in the comment section, I really love to see people kind of tag off other people's ideas, being like, oh, to expand on your idea, or could you tell us a bit more about that experience? I love to see that. So encouraging full participation of all present. Confidentiality, what it says here stays here, what is learned here leaves here. But another thing to note is that we are mandatory reporters. So one big aspect of that is that we have to report any situation of a child or a vulnerable adult being abused. So just be aware of that before you disclose things. And I would urge you to always ask someone before you disclose something what their reporting requirements are, because everyone's different. And another thing is right to pass. If you don't want to share a story, you don't wish to participate, like I mentioned earlier, asking if you wanted to participate and say, hey, I'm from here, my name is so-and-so. You don't have to participate if you feel like that's a safety issue for you, but although I do encourage you to participate if you'd like. And I invite you really to take breaks and take care of yourself, because we will be discussing digital abuse, abusive relationships. And if you feel like anything is going to be triggering to you throughout this presentation, feel free to take a step back and take space for that, because we don't want anyone to be re-traumatized by anything we're discussing here. So please take care of yourself. And if you need to talk to someone, I would urge you to call our 24-hour crisis or support hotline. It is really a great resource for you. And if you just have questions too about if you're in an unhealthy relationship, you don't have to be certain, but that's a really great place to talk to someone. So I urge you to take advantage of those resources. So one reason why we're talking about digital boundaries today is digital abuse is a very common part of teen dating violence, and not just teen dating violence, all types of intimate partner violence and dating violence. So a lot of times there's these warning signs, especially now because a lot of our interactions during the pandemic have been primarily through digital means or technology. So one thing we ended the polling. I just want to make sure that we have that. So I'm going to share results. So seems like a lot of folks are using Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat on their Twitter, emails a lot. Everyone's using email. And good reason. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, and how comfortable you feel setting digital boundaries. A lot of people feel very comfortable, so that's great to see. That is really great, and hopefully this will add some additional things for you to think about in case, because I know when I was going into this topic, there were a lot of things that I didn't really think about when I was thinking about my digital boundaries, and I was like, oh yeah, I could probably do this a little bit more or add this into what I already have, and it's really great. So yeah, thanks for everyone's participation in that poll. That's really helpful, good to know. So yeah, continuing on with warning signs. Monitoring accounts or devices can be really easy, especially because technology is relatively new and we're still trying to find ways that we can regulate it and find out laws around it. So it's something that's still in its beginning stages of figuring out how do we keep people safe on here. And it's not necessarily the fact that the abuse is new, it's more about it being a new means of controlling a dating partner. So I'm sure people back in the 1940s, before they had internet, they would have done this if this was available back then. This is something that abuse is something that is just finding new ways to occur. So the information we put on the internet can put teens at risk for stalking behaviors by an ex-romantic partner, making an individual feel unsafe or intimidated online. And it can be difficult to see sometimes because it's easier to see warning signs when, you know, maybe a young person is out all night with their partner, or you're noticing that they're not spending as much time with their friends. But when someone's always on their devices, it's hard to tell if that person is going through something. So that's something to keep in mind. Using social media check-ins to track your activities. So maybe, for example, on Snapchat, I saw a few folks who are using Snapchat. Snapchat Maps can be a really easy tool for someone who's abusive to use to track your location. And I thought that was kind of creepy. I didn't know that existed. And my setting was on, my location was on in that app, and I didn't even know it. So making sure we turn those off if we want to. Sending negative, insulting, or threatening messages or emails, controlling who can't follow or be friends with on social media. So why are you friends with so-and-so? That kind of controlling behavior. Sending unsolicited sexual images and or pressuring you to send sexual images can be a huge thing, and especially because a lot of folks tend to say things or do things on the internet they normally wouldn't do in real life. That's something, because it feels so removed, it's just your screen, you know, and you feel like you could do anything. So that's something that's really common. Creating fake social media profiles in your name and image. And if anyone's ever seen the MTV show Catfish, you can see how often a lot of times people who just meet on the internet and don't meet, have never met the person in person, that could be a very huge risk factor in someone pretending to be someone else. And someone catfishing you with photos that do not look like them or might be adjusted, and especially with filters and everything, it could be very convincing a lot of the time. So anything to add, Chris, that you wanted to talk about in terms of warning signs?
Well, first I'll introduce myself. My name's Chris McBride. I'm the Prevention Education Outreach Manager at Domestic Violence Services. And before I get into this, I did want to say, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to use the Q&A portion of the webinar. I will be monitoring that this entire hour or 45 minutes. And we'd love to answer any questions, or just, you know what, if you have something that works well in anything we're talking about, toss it in there. We'll chat about it. Okay. As far as the warning signs go, one thing that we also see with online culture, and it's specific to online culture, is the creation of an echo chamber. And when the echo chamber has been created, it can reinforce some of these things that should be obvious. So and anyone who sat in last time knew or saw me kind of put on the ally adult hat, the adult ally hat might be a better way to put that. So I'm going to do that again this time. So some of these things that seem obvious, not sending sexualized pictures of yourself, not requesting them repeatedly and aggressively, the echo chamber of the internet can kind of change the way that gets treated in the majority of your social interactions if you are engrossed in that echo chamber. So some of what we're going over today feels obvious, especially to some of us who maybe had a dial-up modem for the first time growing up in middle school. But it might not be obvious given the new world that we live in and given the social construct that's kind of been created around the teenage years nowadays. So all of these are great, but that's just something to keep in mind as we move forward. It might seem apparent, but it might not be to the teens and to the vulnerable people in your life.
Yeah, no, that's very much true. I think this information, when you look at it, it's like, oh my gosh, no duh. But at the same time, I think when you factor in the fact that there's a lot of pressure to do certain things, and you're worried maybe it's your first relationship and you really want to make your partner happy, that kind of pressure to, for example, send sexual images can feel a lot more weight to it, especially. So that's something that can be taken advantage of, especially when there's a vulnerability of, this is my first relationship, I really want it to be great, I want it to be successful, maybe I hope we get married one day. Because I don't think anyone thinks, oh, this is my first relationship, I want it to end in sadness. You always want the best outcome for that relationship, and sometimes when it's your first relationship, you're not as able to see past a certain thing. So maybe you don't have the experience to say, oh, this is what goes wrong in a relationship. You're going off of maybe what you see on TV or media that kind of models relationships for you, because that's how I learned about relationships, was through movies, television, and I kind of just like passed off my mom as someone who was just like, oh, you know, make sure you do this or make sure you do that, make sure this person isn't this, because she was a worrier. But at the same time, it's hard to really have that perspective until something you have experienced sometimes, or it's explained to you in a way that's not as, you know, lecture-y or in that sense. So sometimes sharing stories helps, you know, to get that kind of intuitive sense of this. So just keep that in mind, because this may seem obvious, but it can feel very different in reality. Good point. So let's go on to kind of checking in with yourself. So I think this is something that's really important to do before you talk to someone about your boundaries digitally, because you need to see what you feel comfortable with. What are you okay with? And to keep checking in with yourself on it independently without your partner or whoever it is as you're going through the relationship. So do I want our relationship to be social media official? I know that for teens now, that generation, it might be different than my generation, but for me, the huge thing was Facebook relationship status. And that was like how you made your relationship official. I know now it might just be on Instagram or TikTok, some cute video or something, or something to show that you all have that status. You guys are official. So that's something that you might want to consider. Do I really feel that strongly about this person to make this public? Because one thing to think about is, if you make this public, there can be pressure on you to be the perfect couple, people saying, oh, these guys are together. And if you have any questions about it, it might be a little harder to get out of that relationship. So you can kind of think about that. That's a really important question to think about. And another thing is it okay to, if you're not official, is it okay to tag each other in posts or check in places together? What pictures am I okay with sharing? And do I want people to know where we were? Sometimes you might want to tag them on a date or at a location or something. What about communication expectations through texting or social media? Is it okay if the person double texts me? When is it okay for someone to text me multiple times before I respond? When does it become creepy for me?
Gina, I'm going to interrupt real quick. So we did just get a comment. Looks like this is getting shown in presentation mode, and so not everybody can see the entire...
No, that's not good. Okay, I got that. Is this better? Oh, wait. Here
looks like it's still in. There we go.
There we go.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that input. I would hate that this goes through and you all get to see all the behind the scenes aspects of it. Not saying that it's not fun to see that sometimes, but it's good to know that some folks can't see it. Yeah. So thank you for whoever commented about that. I appreciate it. So yeah, what are your communication expectations through texting or social media? Another thing is, are you comfortable sharing your GPS location with your partner? And when is that okay? Because I know sometimes it can be a helpful tool, like for example, if someone's driving and you're supposed to meet up with them and you want to know where they are, but you don't want to text them because it's dangerous. Don't text and drive. So that's a situation where, maybe that's something that I'm okay with in certain situations, but am I comfortable sharing that location all the time? And what policy should we have around sharing location? Because that could become an obsessive tool to be like, where's my partner? What are they doing? So that's a big one. And another thing is, what are the social and legal consequences of sexting? So that's a huge one because a lot of times if you share sexual images of a minor to friends or people, or if you distribute that, that can be considered illegal in a lot of situations. So thinking of those things through, because a lot of those situations we might think, oh, I'm just sending it to one person. And I think a lot of times, especially with stories on social media, it's so easy to share a photo from your feed or something like that, and we just impulsively do it. I definitely have been guilty of that. I just share things without thinking about it too long. So that's another thing that we have to make sure that we are respecting those boundaries of that person, especially if they trusted us, or do you trust that person with this kind of photography and stuff like that? So, and what kind of digital boundaries are not negotiable and non-negotiable? So that's something to think about hard on your own, because a lot of times you might have a non-negotiable boundary that you didn't realize you had, and someone else is trying to pressure you to give that up. So that's something to really think about. What is non-negotiable for me and what is negotiable on your own? What do you think, Chris? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. So when talking about the legal consequences of sexting, one thing to keep in mind is if a teenager shares pictures of themselves before being 18, that can still be sharing pictures of it could still be a child pornography. In fact, it is breaking child pornography laws, even if it's of themselves. If you do it as an adult of a picture that you took before you were an adult, that also is quite a serious offense, and it's a federal law. So be very careful around that. Regarding the adult ally hat, one thing that I always remind people about, me and my wife, we share our GPS coordinates, and we do it for multiple reasons. It just comes in handy. Like, I'm never checking up on where she is so much as, hey, looks like she's near my favorite restaurant. Maybe she can pick me up a sandwich on the way home. And we didn't do that for forever, right? Like we trust each other enough to have that relationship. And a lot of teenagers, the best or the most fulfilled relationship they've seen are the adults in their life. And those are two very different relationships, especially when it comes to digital boundaries. So as teenagers, say you have the best relationship in the world with your significant other, your teenager ideally wants to model that. Make sure they know where to start to build that relationship. Don't try to jump to the ending where you feel safe with that person. They have to build that themselves. So you're helping build, you're not helping them be where you are in your relationship.
No, yeah, that's a perfectly great way to explain that part, because yeah, there's different levels of trust in the relationship. And I'll talk about this a little bit when we're talking about evolving boundaries, which actually is a perfect segue into evolving boundaries. So thinking about some things might not be maybe non-negotiable right now. So maybe you're saying, you know, I don't feel comfortable sharing my GPS location yet. But maybe, like, for example, in Chris's relationship, you have a level of trust in your relationship. You've known this person for a certain amount of time. You know their habits, right? You know maybe that they're not quite controlling so far, because, you know, you never can rule that out sometimes. But there is a level of comfort in that relationship that maybe you're willing to do that. So that's something that's really important, is that boundaries are not set in stone. They can always be discussed later on without pressure, is the whole aspect of it. Because when you come back to rediscuss it, there should never be like, well, I've waited this long, why can't we make our relationship official yet? And if that person doesn't want to make the relationship official online, maybe they don't want to change their Facebook status or change their, you know, have a photo on Instagram or video on TikTok with you two as a couple, then maybe that relationship may not be right for you. And it's not right to pressure someone into that, but maybe you need someone to meet your needs. Like, I want a relationship that's public, right? So that's something that might be a need that you want to have met, but maybe you can't pressure that other person into it. And sometimes when you're getting to a point where there's no room for movement or flexibility, that could be a sign that it may be time to, you know, say this relationship isn't going to work out. So that's something to keep in mind, is that when you have discussions about these boundaries later on in the digital landscape or in any other aspect, not just digital boundaries, it's important to not have pressure to do that. And especially in terms of tagging each other or checking in with people, because a lot of times we might not know there could be safety issues with that person sharing their location. We don't know if it's a bad idea for us, like as a friend, to tag our friend in a photo. We don't know if that friend secretly has an abusive relationship with someone that they're trying to escape. So that's something to really keep in mind. And it really made me think about the way I post on social media. If I'm posting a picture with someone else, I'm very careful to do that. If it's like me or my dog, I'm just like, oh, sure, yeah, I'll post that. But being conscious of other people when we're posting information on social media, and understanding the changing mediums. Like, for example, you might not really be into Instagram anymore. I know the evolution has gone to Snapchat and TikTok, and things are very different, you know, since I was a teen. And understanding how the shift happens differently, and understanding, okay, maybe the way we represent our relationship on Snapchat isn't the same way we represent it in a different medium, or through email, or sharing photos on a Christmas card or something that we send digitally. And so that's something. Another thing is using each other's devices. And I've heard a lot of folks say, you know, in order to have trust in your relationship, you have to share your password or passcode to your phone. And one thing I have to tell you is that for example, maybe your partner might want to order a pizza on your phone or something. They're like, can I use your phone because my phone ran out of battery or something? That's one example of maybe if this isn't abusive territory, it won't lead to abusive territory. Or can I take a picture on your phone or something like that? But understanding the different lines that are there. What is the reason why they are using that device? Are they just using it to check in on your texting, who you're texting, what you're doing, your photos? And that's a sign. And a lot of times, even when someone's cheating or seeing someone else or talking to someone else, a lot of times people end up justifying that in the end, saying, hey, see what happened? They cheated on me. Of course, I have to check their phone. But the issue there is the lack of trust in the relationship more so. If you felt the need to do that in the first place, that's a sign that the relationship is having issues. And that's a sign that you don't have trust. It's not a sign that you have trust. So that's something that's really important to distinguish and to understand. So is there anything you wanted to add, Chris, as well?
No, I think that's well said. It's important to note that trust comes from another. Trust does not come from having to share your information. Trust comes from trusting the person that you're with to share the information that they feel they need to share. So it's really about which direction the information's coming from, where you're starting to run into that line of abuse and control.
Yeah, definitely. Well said. Yes. And also keeping in mind texting frequency too. Understanding, is that coming from a place of insecurity of like, why aren't you texting me back? Why are you seeing someone else? Are you talking to someone else? Or is it something where, oh, I need to add this information because I forgot to put that, there's a lot of times where I send people multiple texts because I forgot to, I couldn't fit it all in one text or something like that. But understanding that context too, understanding how that evolves over time. So one thing I want to talk about is internet and online safety planning. So we're going to talk about different mediums and different ways different ways we could be safe and understanding safety for survivors as well online. So one big thing is email can be intercepted just like physical mail, except if someone knows how to hack things, there's a really easy way to intercept those. Safe browsing practices, I'd recommend finding a VPN. It makes you seem like you're in a different location. So that's usually very safe for a lot of folks. And one thing is, don't rely on incognito mode. I know a lot of folks think that it's a lot more private on Google Chrome to hide search history and things like that, but still not very secure. Safe computers or devices, make sure those are not shared or monitored by someone who might be an abuser. That's something like maybe you might want to use a computer at a library, or you have a friend's computer that you can borrow for a moment, or if you need to look up resources and things like that. Documenting abuse, taking screenshots and recording voicemails if you notice that online. That's a really big one. Opening a new email account, especially because if you're using the same email account, it's highly likely that could be vulnerable as well. So if you want to be really safe, you could start a new email account, and keep monitored accounts active with non-critical communication so your partner won't be suspicious, because a lot of times in abusive situations, it is kind of a red flag when that account does suddenly become inactive. And then you start to wonder. Using several different methods of communications too, and not just limiting it to one. So anything you wanted to add, Chris, in terms of any of these because Chris has worked a lot in direct services, particularly. So he has a really good eye for when he worked with survivors as well.
Yeah, this is all very well done. The big one that I'd recommend, because I worked on the legal side and the shelter side. So the big one I'd recommend is if you document abuse and you save it, save it to a separate cloud. So if you're saving it in your Google account, get a Dropbox. Because it's very easy. And this applies to teenagers. This also applies to anybody who's going through abuse. If you're documenting it, it's very easy to remotely delete something if you have an idea of somebody's password. I've seen it done multiple times. So save in a couple different places. And if you can, make hard copies of things and send it along to somebody you trust. If you reach out on a shared computer, so say you reach out on a shared computer to an organization like ours that has a chat capability, still use anonymous names. Don't make anything specific until you're on the phone with somebody and searching for active help, simply because sometimes even if you delete the history, it's actually saved on the website of the place you're chatting with online. And if somebody was to go back to that website and open up the chat window, it would be there. Be quite a few steps to get there, but I will tell you, abusive individuals, teenagers, adults, abusive individuals know how to find information quickly. So different methods of communication, being careful. This is really good advice.
Yeah. And so I'm going to kind of go on to social media safety as well, because there are a few notes there, especially if understanding that social media is never truly private. Even Snapchat, I know, it says in stories on Instagram or stories on Facebook or any type of story function, even though it's deleted, it's never truly deleted. I talked to my sister, she's an engineer, and she tells me, you know, everything is not private. They save it on a server somewhere else. It's still out there. So even though there's that illusion of privacy, it still exists. So making sure we're posting things that we're okay with our future bosses seeing, you know, one day, because even though people are teens now, and you might think, oh, you know what, why should I think about my employment later on? You know, they'll feel like, oh, this is just a teen, but it does show up later on. And there are ways to find that information. So making sure that we understand that even those functions that seem like they're private are never really private. And I think a lot of people will tell you that and sound like broken records, but it's very true. One big thing is, if you're a survivor, make sure to ask people not to post personal information or location check-ins about you on social media, especially if you're trying to escape abuse, especially if you're not comfortable with it. That could be a real safety issue, and that's oftentimes how abusers can track down. They use other people to get to you. So that's something that's really important. Waiting to post about a one-time event, maybe if you do want to tag the location, wait to post about it later when you're not at the location anymore. After the event is over, and if you want to tag the location of the event, that's usually the safest bet if you want to tag your location. Adjust your privacy settings to reduce the amount of information particular people can see. So a lot of times we don't even take a second glance at our privacy settings, but really get to know them. I have a lot to learn about them myself, so I can't tell you specifically about which ones to go to, but really keep those in mind. Avoiding posting private details to other people's pages that may not have as strict privacy settings. And you also might want to avoid tagging someone else in your post. Another thing that I've noticed is that I don't know if anyone's heard of subtweets, or where people just kind of talk shade about other people online on social media, where they do a post like, well, you know, someone isn't able to do things right, or some people don't know how to be in a good relationship. You know, that kind of passive aggressive kind of like, oh, no one knows who I'm talking about, but whoever it is, you know who I'm talking about. You know I'm talking about you. So that can be really bad for relationships, particularly too. because it's not clear communication in a relationship. So you might want to avoid, and especially that could escalate things in a relationship as well. So I just wanted to kind of keep that tidbit in because I just remembered how often that happened when I was in school and when I was in high school, and how a lot of folks would talk about their beef online, and everyone would be like, who are they talking about? And that can really lead to bullying behaviors and making private things public that shouldn't be public, right? So that just kind of was something I thought about in terms of social media and relationships. Understanding deactivating your account every time you log off to avoid abuse online too. It can be really annoying to do that, but it can really increase your safety. I'm not going to say that it makes you completely safe because, nothing is completely foolproof online. We're all taking a little bit of risk by being online, but the unfortunate part about it is a lot of times you need to use social media. It's become a part of our lives that's almost required. So we all kind of have to take a little bit of risk, even if we use email and that seems like a super secure way to communicate. We're still taking some level of risk. Avoid including private details in your information section, such as phone numbers, addresses, etc. I don't know if you've seen those posts where people post like maybe a chat message and they blur out the name and the phone numbers. That's usually the best way to share something, but also not compromise someone else's safety. And also flag harassing or abusive posts as inappropriate. That's really important, is to hold folks accountable for these types of behaviors. If you see it, a lot of times we're just kind of scrolling through our feed and we just say, oh, well, that's a terrible thing to say. But if someone's saying something that's not constructive, it's something that's harmful, controlling or abusive, make sure to flag that. And that helps keep a record of that kind of behavior for other folks. And avoid sharing your account password. Like I mentioned, passwords are meant for one person. Social media accounts are meant for one person. It's never like, oh, this is Jake and Jill's account, right? It's meant to be for one person. So being aware of that is also important. And if you want to find out a little bit more about social media safety, there's this really great article from Love is Respect that talks a lot about social media, particularly in that safety surrounding that. Anything to add, Chris?
No, that's well done. I did have a thought earlier, but this is going to be one of those times where I can't remember what the thought is. So
it's okay. Yeah. If you ever want to bring it up again later, feel free.
Will do.
Yeah. So yeah, cell phone safety planning. So one big thing is try to avoid answering or responding to unknown numbers or clicking on links in text from unknown numbers, because that's when a lot of spyware software can be installed into your phone, and it's really scary. And a lot of times for unknown numbers, it can be spoofed numbers. Like if you block someone else's numbers, they can spoof in a different number. So that's something to be aware of. Is if I try not to let it, even if it's like an important phone call that I think is going to be important, I make sure that'll go to voicemail, because most folks, if it's really important, they'll leave a voice message. And then you can kind of tell who's calling you. I keep getting annoying student loan forgiveness calls, even though I was like, I never signed up for this. So from Massachusetts and California, and I just ignore it all. But it is frustrating sometimes that you just want to yell at the person, but try to not do that, because I know that is a way that they can get to you, particularly, and that's kind of what they want. And try to change I know I have the same password on most things, but try to change your passwords on a regular basis. And that's something that you can always continue to do. And the one cool thing is that I've noticed is that they suggest really difficult passwords and when you're signing up for things. keeping them strictly to numbers or exclamation points or some kind of numeral thing can be really helpful. And consider getting a pay-as-you-go phone to keep in a safe place for private usage if you feel like you're being monitored too. That could be another safety thing. And that's mostly, I'm talking about like adult allies too, because I know a lot of teens may not, some of you might have a job, right? But I know a lot of young people may not have a job yet. So maybe for adult allies, that's something that you can help young people out with, particularly parents or guardians. That's something that you could keep a lookout for if you're noticing your teen is dealing with a lot of excessive phone calls or texts. Maybe that's something that you can invest in helping them with, or finding resources for that. And take your phone into a cell phone service center to check for spyware on your phone. Another one for adult allies, because sometimes maybe teens might not be able to drive yet. Maybe you don't have your license yet. So that's something that could be more for adult allies to help you out with, is helping you find a cell phone service center. Maybe help paying for that too can be helpful to check for spyware on your phone. Documenting abuse in a protected account or printed form, then delete all the evidence from your phone or laptop just in case the abuser goes in there. And kind of like what Chris was talking about earlier with storing it in a drive or storing it in a Dropbox, storing it in multiple places, having it in straight up, physical form. And another big thing is your partner should never pressure you to sext. If that person is making you feel bad about not sending things to them, that is something that you are not obligated in a relationship to ever do. I know there's a lot of representation in movies and media that you feel like, oh, I need to get to this next stage in my relationship. We have to have our first kiss. Maybe we have to have sex next. And you feel like there's this criteria you have to go through and checklist. But whatever that person wants in your relationship, that is one thing that you obviously should never have to, you should never have to do. Another thing is to try using encrypted messaging apps such as Signal. Oh, and another thing on texting that I really want to point out is for adult allies specifically, try to avoid shaming young people about if they're victims of someone sending out revenge porn or sending out sexual images of them or pressuring them to sex. If you're with a young person who is a survivor and they're dealing with someone who's threatening to share photos of them, try not to shame them. Try more to focus on the behavior of the abuser, because that's something that is the issue. Because that person is, a lot of times these young people trust them and they want to make them happy. So there can be a lot of shame for them for like adults to find out, I did this thing. And, it makes them feel like, oh, I was so stupid. But, trust can be a very powerful thing. You trust that person and you feel like that they're gonna value your privacy. But a lot of times that doesn't happen. So they are a victim in the situation, and they shouldn't be shamed for those certain situations. It's good to advise them not to do it, but after the fact, it's not always helpful to say, I told you so, or that's not a great idea. So that's a big important thing, especially for adult allies, to be aware of that. Anything to add there, Chris?
Yeah, so I remembered what I was going to say in the last slide. I just wanted to point out that as we were talking about social media and passwords and stuff, that somebody in the chat in response to the challenge said that that was specifically something they did. They did not share that information, and they wanted to make sure that nobody else could take possession of their personal pages or know their activity on the sites. And of course, that's a fantastic boundary to set. Regarding your last point around the parents and the sexting, and this is again coming from somebody who worked the support line, who has worked in an emergency domestic violence shelter. The biggest indicator of somebody making it through a domestic violence relationship, a controlling relationship, the biggest indicator that they are going to do so and they are going to end up happy and healthy is the support that they have from the people around them. It's not the resources in the community, although that obviously ties into that, but it is having somebody that they can turn to when the abuse, when the control has become to a point where they need to. This would apply to adults, this would apply to teens. If a teen is being controlled by somebody using their pictures and their relationship with their family to control them, in the end, what's supposed to be the most significant source of support becomes a tool of the abuser. And I can't imagine that there are many family members, many parents who want to be that. Children make mistakes, teens make mistakes, adults make mistakes. Even if you believe that this was a mistake, showing support for the people in your life as they come to you in these important moments can really mean everything to their future relationships and to their current relationships.
Definitely, yeah. And it's so important to keep those lines of communication open. And in order to do that, coming from a position of support is so important, rather than judgment. And so that's something to really keep in mind. And I think a lot of us prefer not to be judged because a lot of us will make mistakes in our lives. And when we really need help to deal with those mistakes, we need someone there that will be someone that won't judge us, that will help us through the mistake and learn from the future, for the future. So another thing I wanted to address is gaming. So I know a lot of times in the pandemic, this is really cute. I heard that a lot of folks are going on virtual dates on Animal Crossing. And that's kind of been a way that people are trying to, you know, stay connected. And especially for dating relationships, I heard someone actually had a wedding on Animal Crossing, which was so cute. I thought that was really great because, you know, there's not a lot of ability to go out and do events or date like we used to, especially before we had to shut everything down. And well, I know that we're slightly opening things up, so that's something that's exciting. But I think this is a really great way. I know one thing is like I'm dating a gamer right now, so I was like, this is something I'm very familiar with in personal experiences. Understanding, especially if you're someone that's not a gamer, respecting your partner's personal time, because that's a lot of times is something that that person really values, and it's something that it makes them feel like they need that time to do something for themselves. And if you are a gamer, it's also important to respect when your partner wants to have time together, and you know, saying one more level or one more save point. I have to beat this boss. And then that can just eat up your time. And, you know, that's something that I've kind of gone through is like the mistakes there and being like, oh yeah, you know, like, I shouldn't interrupt during cutscenes or else he'll be really upset because that's the whole storyline of the game. And having boundaries like that are really important. And another thing is if you both are gamers, playing games with your partner, and especially for adult allies, if you want to connect with, like, for example, if you're a parent and you want to connect with your child, maybe playing games with them can help you understand what they're doing and understand why they're interested in something. I know I actually tried to play Halo with my boyfriend, but I wanted to throw up because I got motion sick. So I get motion sick from first person shooters. So for the longest time, I was acting like I wasn't sick. I was like, I'm fine. I was trying to be one of the boys. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. But then I was about to throw up and I was like, you know, I don't think I can play Halo. I tried, I gave it a shot, but I can't do it. So kind of understanding, you know, advocating for yourself and setting your boundaries helps both of you in the end, because he didn't want to be thrown up on. And I also didn't want to throw up on him and ruin our relationship. This is early in our relationship, but that's something to really understand is when you're advocating for yourself, you're advocating for both of you. in that sense. And I hope that really weird example helped exemplify that. Managing rage too. I know a lot of times folks, I know a lot of times if you lose, there's huge outbursts, there's frustration, anger. But one thing that I was told is a lot of times people tend, when they get upset, when they're gaming, sometimes they might say things, really awful things like, so understanding that when you're expressing frustration in ways that are harmful or hurtful, like if you're saying racist things, sexist things, insults, that's never appropriate. And just because you're upset doesn't mean you can say certain things that hurt other people, and taking out your anger on your friends and family. So understanding that boundary there is really important. And being aware of age differences online, because I know a lot of folks interact with other people online. And a lot of times there's a lot of people who, you might be an adult that's interacting with someone who's underage. And if you're someone who's underage, maybe you're interacting, for example, if you're 18, you might be interacting with someone who's 12. So understanding how we talk to people online and recognizing that those differences in maturity and how we talk to other people, because if you say something kind of off the cuff, like, hey, that was stupid, that was dumb. And that can really affect a younger person because, I know when I was younger, a lot younger, I was very insecure. So if people insulted me online, that had more of an effect on me than when I'm older and I grew more of a sense of self. Now I can kind of take more, I can take more, just be like, oh, that person just running their mouth or something. But I know when you're younger, a lot of times what people say to you impacts you. So being understanding of that as well, especially because there's so much intermingling of different ages on things like Xbox Live or other platforms as well. That's something to really keep in mind. Anything to add, Chris?
I like the fact that you implied that your boyfriend didn't want to get thrown up on by you because you were early in your relationship, but now it'd just be fine, whatever happened. Yeah. Okay, just checking in. So long as, all right.
No, it'd be completely acceptable. Evolving boundaries, right? But yeah, that's definitely a good point to bring up. It's like, that's an example of, this is not a perfect relationship, right? I'm never going to be a cool Halo person who's really into Halo. But that's something how you can make a relationship work without, everything blowing up and being unkind to each other, because I think that sometimes can happen a lot of the time. So just some notes on establishing digital boundaries. I'm going to go a little bit quick here because I want to get to the giveaways, but making sure you can turn off notifications, letting your partner know what you're comfortable and uncomfortable with, knowing when you're at capacity. If your partner texts you for emotional support when you're unable to emotionally engage, you can say these kinds of things. Making a schedule. It can be easy to jump to every message your partner sends. So just make sure you kind of set up times when this is not okay to interact with me, and after this time, especially when you're sleeping, because no one wants to be woken up. Sleep's important, especially when you're a teen, because I know I could not wake up in the morning as a teen. I still have a hard time waking up as an adult, but as a teen especially, I know your clock's different, so making sure you get enough sleep is important. Respecting digital boundaries, tagging. So on the other end, in order to respect those boundaries that some people set for themselves, and try to avoid emotion dumping is a big one, because a lot of times we just text people how we are feeling and we don't think about, are they in the emotional headspace to deal with this right now? So making sure to say, hey, do you think you have time in the headspace to talk about some difficult issues? If not, I could bring this up another time. So that's another thing that I think a lot of folks don't think about. And I didn't think about it too. I just tend to be like, I had a terrible day, here you go. So that can be something to really think about, is how you do that. So, okay, so the giveaway draw. So since Kelly MacArthur, thank you for participating in the challenge, and you're here at the webinar. You want a Starbucks gift card, woo! So congratulations. And so if anyone wants to enter our giveaway next week for family boundaries, our next workshop will be on family boundaries. So you feel free to follow us on social media at SnowCoDVS or DVS at DVS SnowCo for Facebook. You can participate in our challenges by responding to our stories. We'll have questions in the stories for the challenges, and we'll also have posts with the challenges that you can comment underneath and participate that way. So that's how you can win each challenge giveaway. And we really want folks to get engaged, because I know a lot of you have a lot to offer the community in terms of educating folks about boundaries, especially if you're an adult ally. Sharing your experiences around being a teen and having relationships can be really helpful as well. And what you've learned, the lessons through experience, can be helpful to understand as teens. And here are some of our resources. So these are the next 2 workshops that are coming up, so keep an eye out for those. And I'll send out an email for the registration links as well after the session. So yeah, and this is also our, oops, sorry, I kind of went backwards, but this is our 24-hour support line. And that's something that's available to folks who feel like you're in an unhealthy or abusive relationship. So keep an eye, that's a resource that if you need to write down, that would be a great resource. That's kind of like the link to all our services that we offer. We offer legal advocacy, we have shelter services, and we also have housing support for survivors. So all of our services are surrounded around supporting survivors. Anything you wanted to add, Chris?
No, just if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out either to Gina or myself. I think, yeah, we don't have our specific information, but maybe we'll toss that up there. But regarding prevention or education sort of thing, we are available as well.
Yeah, we offer presentations free for any organization, so feel free to reach out to us and email us if you ever want to request a presentation from us that's special for your organization. So thank you all for coming, and congratulations, Kelly, for participating in the challenge and winning the Starbucks gift card. We'll get in contact with you about how to get that. So we're going to end the webinar. So thank you all for coming.
Bye, everybody.